Two snapshots, one masked phantom, captured on the same doorbell cam at Nancy Guthrie's Tucson residence. Yet the details tell a chillingly distinct story in that first frame. No gear, no holster, merely a figure in a black ski mask looming in the dark. Fast forward to the second image, and he is geared up for war sporting that 25-liter Ozark trail pack we have all seen. You can see the holster slung low on his hip, and that tactical light, every tool required for the horror that was about to unfold. We finally have the answer confirmed by insiders speaking to News Nation as to why these images show such a drastic evolution. It explains why this individual appears in two completely separate states of readiness. This reveals the terrifying truth about his premeditation because these pictures were not snapped during a single event. These visits happened on separate nights. He was stalking Nancy Guthrie's doorstep long before he took her. Days prior to February 1st, he stood in that exact spot, staring into the lens, masked up and analyzing his target. What makes this discovery absolutely gut-wrenching is realizing that Nancy, at 84 years old, was sitting just feet away. She was living her life convinced that her locked doors and alarm systems were enough to keep the world at bay. She was likely winding down, maybe reading a book or catching the news, just going through the motions of a standard evening. It was that false sense of safety that millions of solitary folks rely on to sleep soundly at night. Sometime before the 1st of February at an hour we cannot pinpoint, while Nancy was oblivious inside her sanctuary. A predator was silently occupying her entryway, and she had zero clue he was breathing the air right outside her door. There was no silhouette to warn her, and the alarm remained silent because he never actually tried to breach the perimeter. Instead, he stood in the shadows, face hidden, memorizing her home's defenses and spotting the weak points in her security. He clocked when the lights flickered out, signaling bedtime, and scanned the street for any nosy neighbors or passing cars. He was calculating the best way in and the quickest way out. He mapped out the property from the outside, gathering the data a hunter needs before the strike, and then he simply vanished without entering. He did not touch Nancy that night. He just collected his intel and walked away into the darkness. For days, Nancy Guthrie went on with her life tragically unaware that she had already been marked as a target. She enjoyed meals with family and card games with her daughter Annie, maintaining the independence she had cherished for over 8 decades. She trusted that the odds were in her favor, never imagining anyone would single her out, but randomness had nothing to do with this. She was handpicked, analyzed, and the trap was being set before he eventually returned to spring it. He returned with the pack he secured between trips, armed with the weapon he obtained to dominate his victim. He arrived with the tactical edge from his recon mission, prepared to execute his plan for those 41 minutes. This was not a burglary gone south or a spur-of-the-moment decision fueled by opportunity. This was cold, calculated surveillance followed by a precision operation, a predator watching his prey before making the kill. It is the specific horror that keeps everyone living alone, awake at night, buried deep in their subconscious. The terror of being observed while you think you are alone. Being marked for violence while you go about your day, thinking locks and luck are enough to keep you safe. Nancy was in danger because a stranger decided she would be, and that Google Nest camera caught every second of it. It recorded his silent vigil, capturing the time he spent loitering on her porch, thinking he was a ghost in the night. The very tech he attempted to neutralize on the night of the abduction. The device he tampered with on February 1st had already uploaded footage of his previous visit to the cloud, preserving his image forever. His scouting mission is on file, and his final approach is on file. His arrogance in thinking that smashing a camera would hide his tracks turned out to be his fatal mistake. Now, detectives are working with 2 distinct snapshots from 2 separate encounters. These twin pieces of evidence prove this was a targeted attack and completely reshape our understanding of the crime. Before we dive into what these images tell us about his surveillance tactics, why this confirms Nancy was stalked rather than chosen at random, what it signifies when an 84-year-old is tracked like big game, and how this new timeline could blow the case wide open. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell because this investigation just pivoted in a massive way regarding those 41 minutes. The discovery of 2 male DNA profiles and the strategic disabling of cameras points to a level of sophistication we need to discuss. Critical prescriptions remained on the counter, a chilling signal that keeping her alive was never the endgame. This was a calculated scheme set in motion long before Nancy Guthrie vanished. A scheme built on stalking her residence and memorizing her daily habits. He pinpointed her weak spots, gathered the necessary tools, and steeled himself for the moment he would return. Hit that subscribe button because Nancy's fate represents the primal terror haunting anyone who lives in solitude. We must comprehend the mindset of these hunters to shield ourselves and spot the red flags before time runs out. Join us for Nancy, for her grieving family, and for an 84-year-old lady who is owed both truth and retribution. Nancy Ellen Guthrie entered this world on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She was 84 and the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the NBC Today Show anchor viewed by millions. A devoted grandmother and deeply religious soul. She maintained her independence in Tucson despite struggling with mobility and chronic illness, while a Google Nest doorbell silently logged every movement at her threshold. That digital eye identical to millions installed on porches throughout the United States. It was intended to offer peace of mind and record any dubious strangers. It was meant to help Nancy feel secure in her solitude, and it certainly did its job. It captured every single detail. According to insiders speaking with News Nation, that lens caught the masked intruder on at least 2 separate dates. Let me demonstrate exactly what shifted between those appearances. Allow me to highlight what those discrepancies tell us about criminal foresight and the evolution of a predator. The initial image reveals a disguised male at Nancy's entry, his face completely obscured from hairline to throat by a black ski mask. Not an inch of skin is exposed, rendering his features invisible. He achieved total anonymity with a full face covering, suggesting he knew about the cameras and took specific steps to remain a ghost even during his scouting runs. His black attire melts into the darkness. There are no reflectors, no unique logos, nothing that would stick in the memory of a neighbor glancing through their curtains. But most importantly, his back is bare. There is no firearm holstered at his waist or silhouetted against his frame. The photo shows 0 tactical gear. It is just the mask and the man standing at her front door. It shows him lurking there while Nancy was likely asleep, inside isolated and defenseless. This is pure reconnaissance. This is the gathering of intel, a hunter analyzing his target before finalizing the time and method of attack. Verified sources state the second image was captured on an entirely different date. It depicts the same disguised shadow in the exact same spot, but he has been transformed by preparation. A 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack is now distinct on his shoulders. It was sufficiently spacious to haul supplies, conceal evidence, or carry whatever else his previous scouting told him he would require. That bag was missing during the first trip. He obtained it specifically for the return. A holster now sits on his hip, keeping a weapon locked and loaded for instant use. It provides the terror of a gun ready to brandish for coercion or lethal force. That holster was absent during his initial check. He bought it between the 2 visits, and his tactical readiness is obvious in every piece of kit he wears. Sources telling News Nation confirm he brought a flashlight, and tools proving these images come from separate nights. One snapshot comes from a scouting mission days prior to the abduction. We do not know the exact night. We cannot verify the hour, but it occurred while Nancy went about her usual routine, blissfully ignorant that she was being watched from the other side of the door. The other image is from the early morning of February 1st, 2026, between 1:47 a.m., when the rear camera died, and 2:28 a.m., when Nancy's pacemaker ceased transmission. That was the night 41 minutes of recorded movement inside her residence would alter reality forever. The night scouting turned into action while Nancy Guthrie remained oblivious to the plot hatching during the days between those 2 photos. She had no clue she was the chosen target, nor that a stranger was gearing up while she felt secure. Consider what remained unknown to Nancy Guthrie. Truly dwell on that thought and step into her shoes for a second. She was unaware that on a previous evening leading up to February 1st, a masked figure had walked up to her house with specific intent. She had no idea he was standing on her porch, analyzing her sanctuary, while she sat inside, trusting in her safety and solitude. She did not know he was mapping out her camera angles so he could figure out how to blind them upon his return. She was oblivious as he watched her lights go dark, learning her sleep schedule to determine the perfect window for operating while she was unconscious. She did not know he was testing the environment to see if any dogs would raise the alarm. He was checking if neighbors had a view of her yard or if the road saw any traffic during those late hours. She did not know that a man planning a return trip was dissecting every facet of her home, her habits, her security, and her frailty. It began as a typical Tuesday evening breaking bread and sharing stories over at her daughter Annie's place. They enjoyed the simple warmth of family life, chatting over cards with the easy confidence that they would see one another again very soon before she caught a ride home in her son-in-law's vehicle due to her trouble getting around. The heavy garage door rattled shut at exactly 9:50 in the evening on January 31st, marking the moment she stepped back into the solitude of her residence. She likely moved through her nightly rituals, swallowing her pills and catching the late news, eventually turning down the covers for sleep. It felt secure, bolstered by deadbolts and electronic eyes. The kind of sanctuary where an 84-year-old lady in an upscale Tucson suburb assumes she is untouchable. Yet unbeknownst to her, a phantom had already visited her doorstep under the cover of a previous night to scout the perimeter. He had collected every scrap of intel required for his mission while Nancy remained completely oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. There was no warning that her fortress was actually a house of cards, waiting to be toppled the moment he decided to return. The true horror captured in those images proves she wasn't just grabbed, she was stalked, chosen with chilling precision, and watched until the moment was perfect. Meanwhile, her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, was occupying a different world entirely. She was stationed overseas in Italy, broadcasting the Winter Olympics for NBC, as the nightmare unfolded back home. While she delivered the news with the poise that made her a beloved national figure, she carried on with the total conviction that her mother was secure thousands of miles away. Over the past 23 agonizing days, she has come to realize that the masked figure didn't just act on a sudden whim. This wasn't a crime born from a split-second choice or a burst of frantic desperation when an opportunity arose. He didn't stumble into a situation that got out of hand. He orchestrated it standing on her porch days before February 1st to finalize his plan. He wore a mask even during his practice runs, fully aware of the surveillance cameras, as he memorized the layout of the grounds. He pinpointed every weak spot and cataloged exactly what tools he would require for the abduction. As Savannah discussed figure skating scores and interviewed gold medalists for millions of viewers enjoying their morning coffee, this monster had already completed his dry run at her childhood home and finished his surveillance logs. He was already gearing up for the main event, and absolutely nothing Savannah did halfway across the globe could have altered the outcome. She was powerless to shield her mother from a plot hatched in the dark while she was physically located on the opposite side of the planet. That specific realization is the torment she carries with her every single waking moment. It is more than just the crushing unknown or the fragile hope that after 23 days, Nancy might still walk through the door. It is the gut-wrenching understanding that her mother was tracked and analyzed like a trophy buck in the woods. She was taken by an individual who made cold, calculated decisions during every phase of the operation. The surveillance imagery confirms Nancy didn't just fall prey to bad timing. She was singled out. An observer analyzed her habits and only returned when he felt completely prepared to strike. For a daughter, that distinct fact carries a weight far heavier than a random act of violence ever could. You can chalk up some tragedies to terrible luck or being in the wrong spot, but a targeted attack is pure intention. It means a stranger looked at your parent and consciously decided to inflict this harm, a fact Savannah must now accept. The pair of photographs confirms this nightmare scenario, with one showing the rehearsal and the other capturing the crime. Together, they weave a narrative that obliterates any comforting lies about accidental misfortune. Ted Williams, a former homicide detective who spent decades working the violent streets of Washington, D.C., he has dissected an endless stream of case files regarding residential break-ins and kidnappings. In his public assessment of the Guthrie file, he noted that criminals who perform dry runs operate with a sophistication that sets them apart from desperate drug addicts. Your average smash-and-grab burglar does not waste time on preliminary visits. They prowl the streets, scanning for obvious cues like overflowing mailboxes or pitch-black windows. When they see a chance, they strike right then and there, rather than retreating to plan a return trip. However, Williams and other behavioral experts agree that methodical predators function on an entirely different wavelength. They curate their victims based on a specific set of criteria that fits their twisted needs. It might be because the person lives in isolation, moves slowly, or adheres to a schedule you could set a watch to. They might choose a house because the back door is hidden from the street, and they confirm these details through careful observation. Their goal is to eliminate any variables that could jeopardize the mission before they even step inside. They need to know exactly when the household settles down for the night. This intelligence is gathered by watching for the bedroom lights to fade and checking if there are any alert dogs guarding the perimeter. You figure that out during the scope out by sneaking up close and listening for any barking dogs. Can the neighbors see inside? You get that answer during the scout by checking the houses next door to see which windows look right at the target. Where are the lenses pointing and how wide is their view? You learn that during the recon by walking past from different sides to spot the hardware. What is the best way in and the fastest way out? You map that out by studying the yard, the streets, and the shadows that keep you hidden. How fast do the cops show up if an alarm goes off? You time that by checking where the station is and how they patrol the area. Every question that adds danger, every snag that could mess up the job, every detail that needs a leash. It all gets locked down during the stakeout before the bad actor makes a move. Once they feel they own the space, once they have grabbed whatever tools or help they decided they needed, once they pick the perfect moment based on their homework, they strike. That is exactly what these two snapshots capture. Trip 1 gathering intel. He stands at the door with empty hands because this trip wasn't about violence. It was about homework. Watching the house, spotting the cameras, noting when the lights cut out, learning how she lived, stacking up the facts that would guide the final act. Trip 2, the real deal. He comes back with that Ozark trail bag because the scout told him he needed storage space. He comes back with a holster and a piece because the scout told him he needed to scare and control. He returns with the full kit because the secrets he stole during Trip 1 made sure Trip 2 was flawless. Nancy Guthrie had no clue about that first visit. By the time the second visit went down in the dark hours of February 1st, it was way too late to stop what he planned during the gap between watching and acting. And that is why these images are so bone-chilling. They prove Nancy was going about her last normal days while being analyzed, while being targeted. While a stranger counted down the minutes until his return, she felt secure. But she was prey. That is the cold, hard truth these surveillance shots reveal. The gap between the two pictures, empty-handed versus geared up, unarmed versus carrying a weapon, tells us exactly what the prowler learned during his scout that shaped his plan. The bag tells us he decided he needed to haul something. Maybe to sneak tools inside. Maybe to steal things or evidence, maybe to move something tied to those 41 minutes we know he spent in her house. Whatever the motive, the scout proved a bag was mandatory, so he went out and got one. That Ozark trail bag, with its 25-liter size, has turned into one of the hottest clues in this whole file, according to the sheriff. since that specific bag is sold only at the big blue retailer, not found on other giant web stores, not sold in hiking shops, not moved through any pipeline except those specific superstores. That rarity creates a massive break. The guy bought that sack somewhere between his scout trip and the attack on February 1st. That sale happened. That record lives inside the store's databanks. Every buy at that store builds a paper trail. The slip logs the date, the hour, the shop address, the lane number, the cost, and how he paid. If he swiped a card, his real name is tied to the sale. If he paid with paper bills, the receipt still freezes the exact moment and place the deal went down. But more critical, every checkout lane has a lens pointed right at the face of every shopper. Every door has eyes recording every soul who walks in and out. Every lot has scanners that read license plates. If he grabbed that bag at a physical store, his mug is on tape, even if he used cash. The ride he drove is on film, the tag number is logged. If he clicked to buy it on the web, the digital address used to place the order is saved. The shipping spot is on file. The login details build a bio. Either path that bag of purchase between the scout and the strike left a breadcrumb trail that detectives are hunting down right now. The sheriff labeled this backpack as one of the strongest threads in the web. He would not say that unless the store handed over deep records and the team was busy matching sales against the videotapes. Breaking updates are shedding new light on the investigation. Detectives have been glued to monitors for days, scanning endless hours of Walmart security tape, specifically hunting for Ozark Trail backpack sales, ignoring everything else. They are running a fine-tooth comb through sales records across Tucson and the surrounding regions, checking every single register, ringing up a sale. The mission is simple: find the exact moment that bag was sold to the masked figure who showed up at Nancy's doorstep on February 1st, because timing is everything. Pinpointing the time of that initial scouting photo allows police to shrink the search window drastically. He picked up the gear sometime after casing the joint, but before he actually made his move. We're talking about a tight time frame, maybe just a couple of days. Any pack sold in that short span is now a critical piece of the puzzle. Notice the holster in the second image. It wasn't there before, proving he geared up between trips. That first look told him that subduing an 84-year-old woman meant bringing a weapon to scare her into silence, even if he didn't plan to shoot. It is about the fear a gun instills, the instant obedience it demands, and the dominance it grants. So he went out and got one, and Sheriff Nanos made a point to mention that this holster has very distinct features. He wouldn't bring it up unless those details made it easy to spot or track down. We are looking at a cheap piece of kit, maybe $10 tops, the kind of generic gear you grab off a rack at a big box store. But when you pair that bargain bin item with what looks like a Walther semi-automatic, things get weird. Usually, if you spend money on a quality firearm, you buy a rig that actually fits and holds it securely. Sticking a pistol worth hundreds into a $10 sleeve is a mismatch strange enough to stick in a clerk's memory. Federal agents are currently hitting gun stores all over the city, flashing a very specific hit list of 18 to 24 mugshots. One shop owner told the press exactly what they are asking: have these faces been in your store? And did they buy a weapon? Do they look like the guy on the porch cam, or do you recall ringing up a holster just like this one? That focused lineup of roughly 24 names shows they have made massive strides in the case. It means they took 40 to 50,000 wild tips from the hotline, filtered out the noise, and honed in on a few prime suspects. Those surveillance shots are going to help whittle that short list down even further. If any of those 24 suspects were spotted lurking near Nancy's place in the days leading up to February 1st, that is a hit. If any of them were caught casing other houses or acting shady nearby, that is another red flag. If one of them bought that specific backpack or the mismatched holster setup during the critical window, it is game over. When all these different leads point to the same guy, you get an ID that is rock solid compared to just one clue. Now take those scouting photos and layer them over the two distinct DNA profiles confirmed in the file. First, there is the unknown male genetic material pulled from a black glove discovered about 2 miles from the crime scene. That glove looks identical to the ones the masked intruder was wearing in the video clips. Lab techs managed to pull the sample from the inside lining, right where sweat and skin would rub off during wear. Then you have a second unknown male profile found right inside Nancy's house. The sheriff went on record calling it a partial sample found indoors, confirming 2 separate men and 2 unique genetic signatures. These are 2 people with zero reason to know Nancy or be anywhere near her property. The samples do not match each other, meaning we are definitely dealing with 2 different perpetrators. Finding 2 men working in tandem takes on a whole new meaning when you factor in the proof of advanced scouting. Those earlier visits suggest a calculated 2-man job rather than a solo act. Maybe one guy handled the initial casing while the other waited in the wings as backup. Or perhaps the scout realized he couldn't handle Nancy and the 41-minute timeline alone, so he recruited muscle for the main event. Whatever the split 2 DNA hits plus pre-planning proves, this wasn't just some desperate junkie acting on impulse. This was a duo executing a mission that required serious foresight, gear prep, and strategy. They gathered intel and sourced equipment before spending 41 minutes inside the home to carry out the plan. Splitting up the work to maintain control and finish the job implies a level of professional organization that stems from those early recon trips. You don't just wing it for nearly an hour inside a house with a partner. You have to map out the operation beforehand. You need to know roles track the clock, agree on silent signals, and have a clear plan for getting out clean. All that intricate plotting only works because they did their homework gathering deep intel on the house, the target, the alarms, and the terrain. Those 41 minutes stamped into the digital record aren't just empty time. From the second the feed cuts to the moment Nancy's heart monitor goes silent, that gap isn't a mystery. It's the final act of a script written days in advance. That 41-minute window wasn't about stalling or panicking or figuring things out on the fly. It was exactly the duration they needed, tailored precisely to the intel gathered during their stakeout. Whoever was behind those 2 DNA samples knew exactly when she turned in for the night and exactly when the house went dark. They had studied the street patterns enough to know the precise window to strike when the neighbors wouldn't see a thing. The surveillance told them exactly where the electronic eyes were watching from. They knew which wires to cut first and how to glide past the motion detectors without setting off a single silent alarm. Thanks to their homework on the floor plan, they knew the exact step count to get to Nancy's bedroom. They knew right where to look for loot. 41 minutes is the signature of a pro who did his research. You don't see this kind of timeline with frantic amateurs kicking in doors without a clue. Smash and grab thugs are in and out in seconds, terrified of getting caught. This was a slow, deliberate dissection by someone who knew they owned the clock. Their prior scouting gave them the ultimate weapon, the certainty that nobody was coming to stop them. Leaving those pills behind, critical heart meds, an 84-year-old with a pacer needs to breathe shifts from an oversight to something much darker. If this guy was prowling the grounds days prior, mapping out exactly how those 41 minutes would play out, if he had the headspace to visualize dragging Nancy out of her sanctuary, then abandoning her lifeline wasn't a fumble in the dark, it was a cold calculation made before he even stepped inside. Just let the weight of that reality sink in for a second. While he was packing his bag and loading his weapon in the safety of his own hideout, he was already running the simulation in his head. He plotted out his dwell time, his movements, and his exit strategy. He weighed the options of robbery versus abduction. And somewhere in that quiet planning phase, he sealed her fate regarding the medicine. Grab the bottle or leave it on the nightstand. Keep her breathing or let her expire. The crime scene paints a clear picture he chose to leave them, and that wasn't a blunder made under pressure. That was a verdict reached in cold blood long before the break-in. Keeping Nancy alive wasn't on the agenda. Her prescriptions didn't matter to him because he never intended for her to need them tomorrow. That premeditated choice made in the comfort of his preparation days screams intent louder than any signed admission ever could. Sheriff Chris Nanos called it from the jump. He knew the vibe was completely off. He rolled out the murder squad on the very first day. By his own admission, that's almost unheard of for a standard missing persons report, but the timeline spoke volumes. The abandoned pills screamed that her well-being was never the objective. The dark cameras proved the intruder knew the tech, but these recon photos are the smoking gun Nanos was looking for. This was a hit, a specific mission carried out by a predator who hunted Nancy specifically. Now, the smart camera that caught him twice relies on the cloud to do its heavy lifting. The second a shadow crosses that lens, it snaps a clip and beams it straight to Google's servers, locking it away in the owner's app instantly. That is just how these modern smart home setups work. The physical device hanging on the wall doesn't hold the footage, so you can't just smash it to hide your tracks. That video flies through the air to a data farm thousands of miles away before the intruder even takes another step. The perp clearly knew the lens was there. We know this because he tampered with it on February 1st to mask the abduction. What he failed to grasp was that his previous scouting trips were already immortalized in the cloud way beyond his reach. He assumed masking the lens on the big night made him invisible. He believed that stopping the recording during the crime meant he had erased his existence, but the internet never forgets. He made a fatal miscalculation because that scouting trip from days earlier was already locked into the system. It was safely uploaded to Google's servers tucked away in cloud storage that remained completely untouched by whatever damage he inflicted on the physical lens on February 1st. This is the classic blunder criminals commit when they understand the gadget in their hand, but fail to grasp the mechanics of cloud-based data transfer. Smashing a camera or a recording box might have done the trick in decades past, when the footage lived on VHS tapes or hard drives sitting right there in the living room. Smash the tape. Crush the drive. Eliminate the proof. However, modern systems connected to the cloud beam that data out instantaneously. The video clip leaves the local device and finds a home on a remote server mere seconds after the motion is captured. Breaking the camera prevents it from seeing anything new. It does absolutely zilch to erase the history that has already been beamed up and archived elsewhere. And that previous recording, that recon mission the suspect assumed, happened in total secrecy under the cover of darkness. Actually handed detectives the exact evidence he thought he was destroying on February 1st. This tech screw-up might be the key to unmasking him because now the cops have 2 pictures instead of 1, 2 confirmed trips instead of 1, 2 chances for bystanders to spot him instead of just 1, 2 distinct times when his existence generated potential clues rather than just a single event. The entire scope of the investigation just doubled due to a digital mistake he was completely unaware of. If that masked figure was lurking at Nancy Guthrie's doorstep days prior to February 1st, someone could have easily spotted him. Maybe a neighbor glancing out the window at an odd hour caught a glimpse of a masked silhouette at her door and thought it was weird but didn't call it in because it wasn't the night she was taken. Perhaps a dog walker strolling through the block saw a guy in a mask at the door and felt a shiver of suspicion but didn't dial 911 since no crime had taken place yet. Or a delivery driver cruising through the zone who clocked a masked individual and filed it away mentally but never linked it to the abduction that would happen days later. During the kidnapping itself on February 1st, the perpetrator worked during the deadest part of the night, from 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m. That hour when the world is asleep, when the streets are silent, and witnesses are scarce, whereas the scouting trip could have happened whenever. Maybe in the evening when folks are still up and might peek through the blinds. Or late at night when pet owners are out for that final lap before bed. Could be early morning when the insomniacs or the gym crowd might see movement. We honestly don't know when that initial snapshot was captured, what day of the week it was, what specific time, or whether it was a single day before February 1st or a full week prior. What is certain is that this blows the witness timeline wide open. Tips that felt useless because they mentioned a masked man days before Nancy vanished suddenly turn into gold. Residents who said, "I swear I saw a guy at her place, but it was Tuesday and she wasn't taken until Saturday, so I kept my mouth shut," now have a serious reason to speak up because that Tuesday sighting could be the very recon trip caught in that first image. Anybody who noticed anything sketchy in the lead up to February 1st, like a person in a mask, a car creeping slowly past her house a few times, or a stranger wandering the neighborhood who didn't fit in. All of that is now incredibly important. The window of investigation just stretched from a single night to several days of possible sightings and encounters. And that wider net is a nightmare for a suspect who believed he moved like a ghost during his prep work. Since doing recon by definition means you have to physically be at the target site, and standing there naturally opens you up to being seen by others, he likely assumed the shadows and his mask and the quickness of his visit meant nobody would catch him or recall it. However, human memory shifts when people find out later that something they saw is tied to a horrific event. A person might have spotted him days prior and brushed it off, but now that they know scoping visits happened, that witness might suddenly click and say, "Wait a minute, I actually did see a guy at that house before she was taken. I didn't think it was important, but now I get it." That sort of backward-looking memory sparked by new details about the scouting can generate leads that were never phoned in because the observers didn't grasp the weight of what they were looking at. Detectives are going to be hunting for those exact leads right now. They'll be grilling the neighbors. Think back to the time before February 1st. Did you notice anything odd? Anyone standing at her door? Any cars you didn't know? Any strangers walking around the block who looked like they didn't belong? The interrogation has shifted because the timeline has grown. And a bigger timeline means a bigger chance for someone to have seen something that matters. Surveillance cams on houses all over the neighborhood are now gold mines for the investigation, not just for February 1st, but for the days leading up to it. Ring doorbells, Nest cams, private security setup, they all keep video for different lengths of time based on what plan the owner paid for and their settings. Some save footage for 7 days, some keep it for 30 days, and others hold on to it even longer. If the Prowler's scouting mission happened while local cameras were still saving data, that digital trail is waiting to be found. A private lens down the block could easily have snagged a car creeping down Nancy Street during that pre-attack survey. Another device might show a figure lurking in the shadows at odd hours, while a sequence of clips could map out a deliberate repeated path to the victim's doorstep. Detectives will demand every byte of video from the surrounding blocks, stretching the search back a full week or more before the abduction took place. This significantly widens the net of potential digital evidence available to the team. Roadside monitoring stations on the approach routes to her house suddenly take on critical importance across that wider time frame. If the perpetrator drove his own car to scope out the target, he inevitably crossed through intersections watched by the state. Should he have returned several times to memorize the layout, his car would ping those sensors on several distinct days. Analyzing which cars show up repeatedly in the days leading to February 1st allows investigators to filter out the noise and spotlight the threats, even if the license plate is blurry or the driver is obscured because a single pass by the street might just be random chance. But spotting that same sedan 3 separate times in the week prior to the crime changes the equation entirely. That constitutes a behavioral pattern demanding scrutiny, and law enforcement possesses the software to stitch these sightings together. With the timeline pushed back by the discovery of these scouting photos, those analytical tools become exponentially more powerful. As of right now, 23 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished from her residence in Tucson, the hunt presses on with fresh intensity, fueled by proof she was stalked while genetic experts race to decode the two male DNA samples. Specialists are currently constructing detailed family lineages using open-source platforms like GDmatch, where the public consents to police access. They are deploying the exact same revolutionary method that unmasked the Golden State Killer to trace both unidentified male profiles at once. Should both genetic trails lead back to the same extended clan through shared bloodlines, the suspect pool shrinks at breakneck speed because two separate data streams hitting the same target provides near-instant verification. On the other hand, if the samples point toward entirely different lineages, the team effectively gains two distinct avenues of inquiry, doubling the odds that at least one of them yields a name in short order. This is far from guesswork. It is a proven forensic protocol that has already cracked files that sat gathering dust for decades. Joseph James D'Angelo was finally caught after 40 years in the dark only because a distant cousin uploaded their genetic code to a website. That family member had zero intention of betraying a serial monster when they took a simple ancestry test. Yet those shared biological markers guided detectives through a complex web of relatives that ultimately ended at D'Angelo's door. That identical machinery is churning away for Nancy Guthrie this very minute, tackling two profiles instead of one, while the Walmart lead is also being worked. Sheriff Nanos confirmed that the retailer handed over a complete log of every Ozark Trail backpack sold during the critical window. Detectives are matching every single receipt against security feeds that capture the faces and vehicles of shoppers leaving the store. If our man purchased that specific bag between his scouting trip and the actual kidnapping, the record is in the system and the video is on a server, meaning his face is archived, even if he paid with paper bills. Agents are methodically scanning that footage, focusing not on thousands of clips, but on a very specific slice of time. They are looking for bag sales in Tucson stores during the few days between the potential recon mission and February 1st. Simultaneously, the FBI is visiting local armories showing a refined lineup of 18 to 24 photos to dealers. Creating that short list required an immense amount of background analysis. They sifted through 50,000 tips to isolate those specific targets based on hard evidence, and the new photos will sharpen that focus. Because if any individual on that shortlist was spotted lurking near the victim's home prior to February 1st, if one of them fits the description of a suspicious figure seen during the scouting phase, or if they own a vehicle that triggered the traffic sensors near her house on repeated occasions, that layering of independent facts builds a level of certainty that no solitary clue could ever offer. Officers are also re-interviewing the neighborhood with a broader scope regarding the timeline before February 1st. In the beginning, the inquiry was strictly limited to the events of that specific night and the noises heard at dawn. Today, the scope is wider, asking residents if they saw anyone approaching the door in the preceding days. They need to know about slow-moving cars or anything that felt off during the entire week leading up to the event. Widening the net like this often shakes loose critical tips that people withheld because they thought earlier events were unrelated. Meanwhile, authorities continue to harvest doorbell camera data from homes across the area for that extended time frame. Detectives have ripped the timeline wide open, demanding surveillance not just from February 1st, but the entire preceding week. Any lens that recorded movement during that window is now critical evidence as the scope of the inquiry expands dramatically. Broadening the search to cover a longer period inevitably unearths more clues and potential onlookers. It creates countless openings to catch the perpetrator in errors he likely has no idea he committed. Locals are rallying to keep the search alive, refusing to let Nancy fade from memory even as police reallocate their assets. If it were my own mother or a relative out there, I would pray for strangers to help bring them home. A helper told the press they simply want to offer their presence and assist in uncovering any clue possible. Darren Porcher, a retired lieutenant from the New York Police Department, offered his expert commentary on the situation. He stressed that although public help is noble, evidence requires professional handling to ensure it stands up during a trial. The expert also highlighted the strategic importance of introducing a specialized unit known as a clean team. Bringing in fresh eyes can reveal overlooked links that exhausted detectives might have missed after weeks of grinding work. Porcher clarified that this strategy is not a criticism of the skill or dedication of the original agents. However, frequently introducing a completely different squad of detectives changes the dynamic. Newcomers approach the files with a blank slate, potentially grasping concepts that the initial group failed to spot. The surveillance images of the suspects scouting the area serve as that vital new angle. Just as the probe needed a push, these shots open new paths stretching the timeline and confirming premeditation. This evidence invites tips concerning events prior to February 1st that locals previously dismissed as irrelevant. It confirms that digital eyes were watching movements the suspect believed were entirely unseen. Most importantly, these images dispel the notion that Nancy Guthrie suffered from mere bad luck. A masked predator targeted her, studied her habits, and hunted her down, taking pains to hide his face even while scouting. Donald Trump spoke on the matter when questioned regarding the role of federal authorities. Should she be discovered dead, the perpetrators will encounter the harshest penalties the federal government can levy. He was blunt, and when asked if he implied capital punishment, he affirmed it instantly, asking if that was the most severe. Indeed, it is accurate that 400 agents are still dedicated to cracking this investigation. Government assets are still in play, though the strategy is pivoting from boots on the ground to lab work and genetic tracing. Authorities have not given up, but are shifting manpower to areas where the clues are most promising. DNA analysis is slow but effective, just as reviewing store video is tedious, but reveals what was bought. Federal agents checking firearm dealers requires patience, yet it drastically shrinks the list of potential suspects. Work proceeds as the family suffers through 23 days of hell, aware that their matriarch was taken by a cold, calculating planner. Savannah Guthrie keeps showing up for her morning broadcast duties. She holds it together for the cameras while enduring a private terror, recently releasing a clip begging her mother's captor. We are holding on to faith, and I want to tell the person holding her that there is still time to turn back. You are not beyond redemption, and the opportunity to do what is right has not yet passed. However, the surveillance shots confirm the kidnapper made specific decisions, opting to prowl her grounds in a mask beforehand. He decided to learn her weak points, gather his tools, and come back ready to strike, spending 41 minutes inside. He knowingly left her life-saving pills behind a calculated move that proves every step was intentional. Each action was premeditated, meaning this cannot be dismissed as a moment of panic or a robbery gone wrong. An individual decided to target Nancy Guthrie stalking an 84-year-old lady as if she were wild game. Knowing this reality makes the passage of time absolutely agonizing for her loved ones. The images expose a harsh truth for the Guthrie clan. Their mother was not simply unlucky or in a bad spot. This was not a random twist of fate, but rather a specific selection where she was marked for capture. The attacker watched her, studied her moves, and laid out his assault over several days like a true predator. She remained oblivious to the danger until defense was impossible, which is the horror these pictures reveal. It is not just her absence, but the fact that her last normal days were spent in the crosshairs of a man counting down to his attack. She went about her life feeling secure, trusting that her locks and technology would keep the monsters at bay. Security measures are worthless once a predator has specifically marked you as their target. It changes everything when a stalker scouts the location to exploit every weakness. It takes a terrifying discipline to watch, wait, and let days pass between the stakeout and the strike. That calculated strategy, that chilling self-control, that boldness to prowl around in a mask beforehand reveals a sophisticated criminal mindset that turns these snapshots into absolute nightmare fuel. We aren't looking at a random break-in here. This was a methodical hunt. Thanks to cloud backups, the perpetrator clearly didn't account for. We have the receipts. Every approach and every visit sits securely in the archives. Each incident is locked in as hard proof. He assumed that smashing or turning off the lens on February 1st meant he was in the clear. He believed his scouting mission went unnoticed. He banked on that face covering, keeping him anonymous. Every single guess he made was fatal. That Google Nest unit was watching the whole time he was casing the place. Remote servers held onto the footage tight. Digital eyes recorded the very movements he felt sure were unseen. Detectives aren't working with a single snapshot anymore. They have a pair. Not just one trip, but two. That means double the chances for a neighbor to spot him. 2 distinct times his physical presence left a trail behind. The entire case just expanded twofold thanks to a technical slip-up he was oblivious to. There is a witness out there who spotted him scouting the scene. A passerby definitely clocked a masked figure on the porch days before February 1st and felt something was off. A local likely saw it but stayed quiet since they couldn't link it to a tragedy that hadn't happened yet. We need that individual to speak up immediately. That critical info paired with the surveillance shots and the genetic tracing currently underway, along with the transaction history for that bag from Walmart, and the Bureau's roster of 18 to 24 potential suspects might be the key that unlocks his identity. We are covering this case with the utmost deference to Nancy Guthrie and her loved ones. All facts presented stem from verified reports by News Nation and legitimate outlets. If seeing the predator lie in wait disturbs you, or if the idea of an 84-year-old being stalked in secret makes your blood boil. If you want to see Nancy get the justice she is owed, hit that subscribe button and spread this video. Keep her name in the spotlight because this criminal who thought he was a ghost dropped breadcrumbs every step of the way. He assumed his masked stakeout would vanish into thin air. The smart home system had other plans. Killing the feed on February 1st didn't scrub the archives. The cloud remembers. He figured he could case the joint and come back geared up without a trace. That Ozark trail bag generated a paper trail at the retailer that investigators are pulling apart as we speak. He wagered that a duo operating for 41 minutes wouldn't shed any genetic material. Now 2 distinct genetic signatures are running through familial databases that have a perfect track record with good samples. His calculations failed across the board. Every safety measure he took crumbled. Now the net is tightening around him from all sides at once. 2 images, a pair of trips, 2 separate dates, double the DNA, and 2 men conspiring on a plot that started with stalking and left Nancy Guthrie gone for 23 days. Every bit of it is recorded, scrutinized, and pointing straight at a name. He made the mistake of returning. The choice to come back after casing the place is his undoing, because scouting missions leave footprints that one-off attacks simply don't. More trips to the site equal more odds of being spotted. Spanning it over days gives security systems more chances to grab a frame. Complex prep work creates endless friction points where things can go wrong. And slip-ups are exactly how detectives win. He fumbled. The tech caught it. Neighbors likely watched it happen. The proof is locked away. Nancy Guthrie needs to be found. Her relatives need closure. And these surveillance snapshots have cracked open new leads that could deliver on both counts. Make sure to follow the channel to stay briefed as we learn more. We have to keep this case trending until she is back and the culprits are named. 2 frames from that smart camera changed everything. The first reveals the stakeout days prior. The second captures the act on February 1st. Together they prove she was a specific target, not a random statistic. They demonstrate a multi-day plot. They expose a hunter who believed he was a ghost, but was glaringly visible. Detectives are pushing forward, the forensics are processing, the digital systems caught it all. Accountability is on the horizon. He dared to return. The camera didn't miss a beat. Buried in the clues we have or the calls coming in right now is the name that ends this nightmare. She deserves the truth. These pictures ensure she finds it because sloppy predators always fall. And he failed at every single step. The story behind those images teaches us a powerful lesson about awareness safety and the importance of paying attention to the small signs around us. Sometimes danger does not appear suddenly. It grows quietly in the shadows through observation planning and patience. The masked man standing at the door was not there by accident. Days before the crime, he returned to the same place, studying the house, the surroundings, and the routines. What looked like an ordinary moment on a doorbell camera was actually part of a careful and troubling plan. This reminds us that our safety often depends on awareness. Technology like doorbell cameras, neighborhood communication, and attentive communities can help reveal patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed. When people share information, look out for one another and trust their instincts. Small warnings can become powerful tools for prevention. But beyond security, there is a deeper lesson about responsibility. A strong community is built when people care about each other's well-being. Checking in on neighbors, reporting suspicious activity, and staying alert are simple actions that can protect lives. In a world where harm may sometimes be carefully planned, vigilance, compassion, and cooperation become our greatest defenses. When communities stand together, darkness has far fewer places to hide.